Hi, and welcome to this introduction to Repro 1 from UHAE, a virtual version of a classic 80s monosynth. Repro 1 is ideal for powerful leads, fat basses, or complex sound effects, with two oscillators capable of oscillator sync and frequency modulation, a fat 4-pole self-oscillating filter, and snappy envelopes. The original synth's arpeggiator is also included, along with a surprisingly powerful sequencer, both of which can be tempo synced in the plugin for extra convenience. The original monophonic character of the synth is preserved, however, and instead of bolting on a standard effects section, we're provided with a chain of characterful stomp box type effects, which can be reordered by dragging over the list to the left. Let's start with an initial preset. We're hearing both oscillators by default. So the first thing I'll do is turn down oscillator B in the mixer section. So we're now hearing only oscillator A. The oscillator can be tuned up or down 12 semitones using the frequency knob, with an octave knob to set the octave range. And we have a choice of sawtooth wave, or square wave, or both together. Note that turning off both waves will result in no output. Let's start with a square. Now I'm going to jump to one of the most fun features of the synth, the sequencer section. Creating a sequence is a simple matter of switching to record mode, then playing a sequence of notes, then switching to play mode. Now playing a note will trigger the sequence, which is clocked by the LFO, so I can speed up the sequence by increasing the LFO frequency, and transpose it by playing different notes. This behaviour is faithful to the original synth. However, these days we expect to be able to tempo sync such sequences to the host DAW. So let's switch the sequencer to run from the clock instead. And I'll set this to 16th notes. If we switch to the sequencer tab, we can see our sequence displayed in pattern 1. And we can turn off steps in the top row to introduce rests, or click again to tie the step to the next step for legato phrasing. And you can edit the note numbers in the middle row if needed, or the velocity values in the bottom row, though these won't make a difference unless you assign velocity to control something. I'll come to that later. Notice that pattern 1 can contain up to 32 steps, though we're only using 16 at the moment. The last step of the pattern is indicated with square brackets around the number. Click to switch this and change the pattern length. Notice also we have a pattern 2 as well. I'll switch to pattern 2 in the sequencer section, then switch to record again. You can click the rest button to add rests on the fly. And I'll switch back to play mode, and I can now play pattern 2, or pattern 1, or I can switch to 1 plus 2, which will play pattern 1 followed by pattern 2, allowing for a maximum 64-step composite sequence. Let's add a few ties to pattern 2 as well. Then switch back to the synth tab to refine the sound a bit more. I'll start by winding down the filter cutoff, then turn up the envelope amount to modulate the cutoff with the filter envelope below. I'll turn the envelope sustain all the way down, and I can now use the decay to control how short and snappy the envelope modulation is for each step. Let's also wind in some resonance. This quickly turns to self-oscillation for the upper reaches of the knob. So I'll keep it a little below halfway to add a squelchy character. Notice that tied steps in the sequence don't trigger the filter envelope. I can change this by switching to re-trigger mode, and now every step triggers the envelope. But I prefer normal mode in this case, to make the tied sections sound more legato. Let's dial in some glide, which glides every note and sounds a bit drunk. So let's switch to auto mode instead, so only tied legato notes will glide into each other. Okay, I'm going to jump to the bottom now and switch to the Effects tab and turn on the first Jaws pedal. Jaws is a powerful wave folder effect, but with the teeth knob turned all the way down, it just provides a nice aggressive distortion, controlled by the folds knob. A little of this goes a long way, but a touch of distortion is just the ticket for this kind of sound. While we're here, let's also turn on the Lyrebird delay pedal and turn up the regen knob to add feedback. Okay, let's jump back to oscillator A, which is set to a square wave. And notice how great it sounds if I adjust the pulse width knob. I want to set the LFO to modulate this parameter, so let's take a look at the modulation section to the left. Here we have 3 modulation sources, each with a level knob and a switch to toggle between 2 different modulation paths, called direct and wheel. These 2 paths can then be routed to any of 5 possible destinations via the switches to the right. So let's find the oscillator A pulse width switch, second from the top, and switch it to the direct path. Then drop down to the mod LFO source at the bottom. This is already switched to the direct path, so when I turn up the level knob, we'll start to hear the LFO modulate the pulse width of the oscillator. And we can adjust the LFO rate and the modulation depth to control the intensity of the effect. Okay, but I want to be able to introduce this modulation as part of my performance, so I'm going to switch the LFO to the wheel path instead, and do the same for the oscillator A pulse width destination. The 2 paths are identical, except the wheel path has the level scaled by the mod wheel, so I can now push up the wheel to introduce pulse width modulation, and pull it back down to return to a square wave. Okay, let's also return to the mixer section and add in some white noise via the 3rd knob, which can add a nice extra brightness to the sound. And a couple of final tweaks. I'm going to turn down the envelope amount knob in the filter section, then drag from the top slot in the perform section at the bottom to assign the envelope amount knob to that slot. Turning up the depth knob to the right will now modulate that parameter with the selected source, which defaults to velocity for the first slot. So if I switch back to the sequencer tab, I can use the velocity lane to set the filter modulation depth differently for each step and create accents. And let's also switch to the iCandy tweaks page and try one of the alternative filter models. I think the driven type suits this particular patch. Note that you can still adjust the main parameters from this page, so you can adjust for the slight differences in cutoff and resonance between the filter types. That's all for now. Look out for part 2, which will explore the arpeggiator and the oscillator sync features. Thanks for watching.